Chapter 3 Ghosts in the Machine. The first rule of disappearance is that silence is not enough. Silence draws attention. To truly vanish, you must become noise. Bruce stood in the shadow of a gargantuan server farm cooling tower in Kabuki, the air humming with the vibration of 1,000,000 fans. He had his portable deck hardlined into a neglected sub-node of the municipal grid. He wasn't deleting the record of Project Belfry. Deletion left a void, and voids triggered checksum errors in Arasaka sweepers. Instead, he was corrupting it. His fingers flew across the mechanical keys of the deck. He injected a cascade of junk data, weather patterns from 2045, corrupted Braindance raw files, and randomized alphanumeric soup into the sector that held the Arroyo coordinates. He overwrote the file's header to look like a standard systemic crash, a victim of the data rot that plagued the old net. Write complete. Sector status, corrupted. Now, if anyone looked, they wouldn't see a secret. They would just see garbage. Bruce jacked out. He adjusted the strap of the heavy, lead-lined duffel bag on his shoulder. Inside lay the Beyond suit, folded into its dormant state, heavy as a coffin. He pulled his collar up against the acid rain that had begun to fall, sizzling faintly as it hit the pavement. He turned south, toward Arroyo. The journey to the industrial district was a lesson in decay. If Watson was the desperate heart of the city, Arroyo was its bowels. The skyline here wasn't dominated by neon, but by smokestacks and rusting gantries. The 6th Street gang patrolled these blocks, draped in pseudo-patriotic iconography and military surplus gear, playing soldier in a war that ended decades ago. Bruce moved through their territory like smoke. He kept his head down, his gait uneven, a limp that wasn't real, designed to make him look like just another broken laborer looking for a shift at the petrochem refinery. He reached the coordinates as the sun began to set, casting long, blood-red shadows across the maze of shipping containers and defunct factories. The entry point wasn't a gate. It was a storm drain, half buried under a landslide of industrial slag and crushed concrete. It looked impassable. To the casual eye, it was a tomb. To Bruce, it was engineering. He scanned the debris. There was a pattern to the collapse, a structural stress point. He set the heavy bag down and wedged a rusted rebar pole under a slab of concrete. He didn't use strength. He used leverage. With a groan of grinding stone, the slab shifted just enough to reveal a biometric panel, caked in 50 years of grime. It wouldn't accept a fingerprint. It wouldn't accept a retinal scan. It was designed for a gene sequence key. Bruce pulled a glove off. He used a jagged piece of metal to slice a shallow line across his thumb. He pressed the bloody digit against the sensor. The system was dormant, running on a trickle charge from a localized geothermal tap. It tasted the blood. It analyzed the DNA. Thomas Wayne, Martha Wayne. The sequence was partial, but the lineage was absolute. A heavy thunk echoed from deep within the earth. The storm drain grate didn't open. The ground beneath Bruce's feet simply descended. A hydraulic elevator, disguised as a patch of ruined earth. He grabbed the bag. The world above vanished, replaced by the smell of stale, recycled air that hadn't been breathed in 30 years. The lights flickered on, halide strips that buzzed like angry hornets. Bruce stepped off the platform into a cavernous space. It was vast, a concrete cathedral carved out of the bedrock. The air was cool and dry. Project Belfry. It wasn't a bat cave. It was a bunker designed for the end of the world. Bruce walked down the central gangway, his footsteps echoing sharply. He passed rows of empty server racks, stripped of their cores. He passed workbenches cluttered with prototypes that had rusted into abstract art. Early exoskeletons that looked like medieval torture devices, seismic dampeners the size of cars. There was power. There was running water, filtered through a deep earth aquifer. There was a medical bay with a dust-covered surgical table and cabinets full of expired morphine. But there was no computer, no bat computer, no global surveillance suite, no fabricators capable of repairing the molecular weave of the Beyond suit. It was a shell, a tomb for an ambition that Thomas Wayne had lost the will to fill. Bruce reached the main breaker panel on the far wall. The readout showed the facility was drawing 400 kilowatts just to keep the lights and climate control in standby. In Night City, power was a commodity tracked by the millisecond. A sudden, sustained draw in a dead sector would flag on the grid monitoring of whoever owned the local substation, likely Petrochem or a curious netrunner. Bruce didn't hesitate. He grabbed the master lever and pulled it down. The halide lights died. The hum of the ventilation fan spun down into silence. Total darkness consumed the bunker. Bruce didn't move. He stood in the dark, listening to the drip of condensation. He felt the weight of the silence. It was the first peace he had felt since arriving. He opened the duffel bag by touch. He pulled out a small, kinetic-charged lantern he'd scavenged and cranked it. A pool of cold LED light illuminated his face. He had a base. He had water. He had a place to bleed where no one could watch. But he had no money. He had no materials. And he was a ghost in a machine he didn't control. He sat on a crate, staring at the deactivated suit. Operational reality, he thought, organizing the problem like a case file. 1. The suit needs repair, requires rare polymers and conductive filaments, expensive, restricted. 2. The mission requires intelligence, access to NCPD databases, corp intranets, street-level rumors. 3. The man. Bruce Wayne is dead. The stranger is alive. He couldn't hack his way to wealth. That left a trail. He couldn't steal his way to sustainability. That made him a target for the very people he needed to investigate. He needed to be part of the economy. He thought back to the data shard, the tiger claws, the conversation with the vendor. Night City ran on a specific currency, and it wasn't just Eurodollars. It was reputation. The city was fractured. The core held the sky. The gangs held the ground. But in between, there was a layer of connective tissue. Fixers. They were the brokers, the gatekeepers. If you wanted a job done that the law couldn't touch, you went to a fixer. If you needed tech that wasn't on the shelf, you went to a fixer. And the people they hired, edge runners, mercenaries, solos. Bruce looked at the suit. In the Justice League, he was a hero. In this world, a man who specialized in infiltration, extraction, and combat wasn't a hero. He was a product. It was the perfect cover. As an edge runner, Batman wouldn't be an anomaly. He would be a high-end asset. He could take contracts that aligned with his investigation. He could demand payment in tech and favors. He could walk into corporate lobbies as hired security and walk out with their secrets. But Bruce Wayne couldn't be the face. Bruce Wayne was too soft, even with the scars. He needed a persona that fit the streets, someone professional, someone dangerous. He wouldn't wear the bat symbol, not yet. The suit was too damaged, and the symbol meant nothing here. He would wear the undersuit, the tactical weave. He would use the darkness. He needed a fixer, and to get a fixer, he needed to make an introduction. He pulled the portable deck onto his lap. He had a few thousand eddies. He needed a vehicle. He needed basic gear. He opened the local BBS boards, scrolling past the ads for Mr. Stud implants and Braindance snuff films. He found a sub-forum dedicated to freelance work in Santo Domingo, looking for drivers, no questions. Bounty, cyberpsycho spotted in Rancho Coronado, NCPD subcontract. No, too loud. He kept scrolling until he found it. A low-level posting buried under spam. Wanted, recovery specialist. Package retrieval from 6th Street territory. Stealth mandatory. If you have to shoot, you fail. Contact. Wakako Okada. Wakako. The name from the Tiger Claw ledger. The tribute recipient. A high-tier fixer in Westbrook, but she dabbled everywhere. Stealth mandatory. That was the filter. Most solos in this city solve problems with high explosives. A job requiring finesse would be filtering for a specific kind of talent. Bruce stood up. He wouldn't go as Batman. He would go as the man who was going to clean up this city, one contract at a time. He unpacked the suit. He stripped the damaged armor plating off the chest and shoulders, leaving only the black, liquid armor bodysuit beneath. It looked like high-end net-running gear mixed with military fatigues. No cape, no cowl, just the dark combat boots and the utility belt. He took a piece of charcoal from the floor and darkened the area around his eyes. He pulled a black cowl-neck scarf up over his nose. It was crude. It was effective. He climbed the ladder back toward the surface. He wasn't the Dark Knight. He was just a man looking for work. Chapter 4. The Art of the Empty Room. Patience was a currency Night City had devalued. In a world of reflex boosters, synaptic accelerators, and instant brain dance gratification, waiting was considered a defect. To Bruce Wayne, patience was a weapon. He had been watching the pachinko parlor on Jig Street for 6 hours. He was perched on the rusted skeleton of a neon sign advertising Real Skinner Sushi, 3 stories up and across the street. The rain had returned, a greasy drizzle that slicked the streets of Westbrook. But Bruce sat motionless under a heavy polymer tarp, his thermal signature dampened by the cold rain and his own slow pulse. He wasn't watching the patrons. He was watching the rhythm. He watched the bouncers rotate shifts every 45 minutes. He watched the courier drones deliver tea sets and data shards to the 3rd-floor balcony. He watched the subtle interference patterns on his portable deck, spikes of encrypted traffic leaving the penthouse office. Wakako Okada, a fixer, a grandmother, a shark in a tank of piranhas. She didn't operate with the brute force of Maelstrom or the corporate sterility of Arasaka. She operated on favors, secrets, and the terrified respect of the tiger claws. Bruce checked his chronometer. 02:45. The last patron had been thrown out. The neon sign for the parlor flickered and died. The bodyguards at the front gate lit cigarettes, their posture relaxing. This was the window, the transition between the business day and the private hours. Bruce moved. He didn't use a grapple. The noise was a risk. He traversed the cabling that strung the buildings together, balancing on bundles of fiber optic wire with the grace of a tightrope walker. He reached the roof of the parlor. He located the ventilation exhaust. It was guarded by a maglock and a laser grid. Bruce knelt, pulling his bulky portable deck from his belt. He didn't hack the grid. That would alert the subnet. Instead, he pulled a small, copper-wound coil from his pouch, a device he jury-rigged in the bunker using scraps from a busted generator. He placed the coil against the lock housing. He waited for the rhythm of the ventilation fan to spin down for its cleaning cycle. 3, 2, 1. He pulsed the coil. An electromagnetic spike, localized and intense. The maglock disengaged with a soft click, tricked into thinking it had lost power. The laser grid flickered for 04 seconds. Bruce slipped through the gap before the system could register the error. He was inside. Wakako Okada sat behind her desk, the holographic display casting a blue pallor over her wrinkled skin. The room smelled of expensive incense and old paper. She was reviewing a liquidation sheet for a failed braindance studio. She reached for the phone on her desk, an antique, hard-lined analog device she kept for sensitive conversations that couldn't be intercepted by netrunners. She lifted the receiver to make her final call of the night. Silence. No dial tone. Just dead air. She frowned, tapping the cradle. Nothing. She looked at her holographic terminal. Network error. Connection lost. She looked at her biomonitor. Signal lost. If you're trying to reach your lieutenant in Kabuki, a voice spoke from the shadows of the corner. He can't hear you. Wakako didn't scream. She didn't reach for the panic button under her desk. She simply set the receiver down, folded her hands in her lap, and turned her chair toward the darkness. "You have turned my office into a dead zone," she said, her voice like dry leaves scraping concrete. "A Faraday cage? Crude. Effective." Bruce stepped into the light. He wore the stripped-down tactical suit, the cowl-neck scarf pulled up to his nose, his eyes darkened with grease paint. He looked less like a man and more like a piece of the city's wreckage given form. "Crude is undervalued," Bruce said. "Complexity breeds vulnerability." Wakako's cybernetic eyes whirred softly as she scanned him. She was looking for the telltale heat of implants, the hum of processors, the data ports on his neck. "You are a ghost," she murmured. "No signature, no ID, no chrome. A netrunner who hacks with a hammer?" "I'm not a netrunner," Bruce said, walking past her display of antique katanas. He moved with a silence that unnerved her. "And I'm not here to hurt you. If I were, I wouldn't have jammed the signal. I would have used the ventilation shaft to flood this room with neurotoxin." "A polite monster," Wakako mused. She opened a drawer. "Cigarette? No. Then what are you, stranger? You break into the office of a Westbrook fixer, disable her communications, and loom over her desk. You want a job? This is a very dramatic resume." Bruce stopped in front of her desk. I want the 6th Street retrieval contract, the one in Arroyo, the one your usual solos keep turning down. Wakako paused, the unlit cigarette hovering near her lips. Her eyes narrowed. That job is suicide for the loud ones, and impossible for the quiet ones. It requires extracting a prototype servo control unit from a heavily fortified depot. They have automated turrets, tripwires, and a localized subnet that fries intruder brains. I know, Bruce said. I also know they rotate their encryption keys every 6 hours, but they reuse the seed code from the previous week because their admin is lazy. Deduction? Observation. Wakako finally lit the cigarette. She took a long drag, exhaling a plume of violet smoke. You have no ports. How do you interface? How do you disable the cameras? You going to throw rocks at them? I have my methods, Bruce said. Methods. She chuckled darkly. Yesterday, my sources in Watson told me about a disturbance. A food vendor saved from extortion. 3 tiger claws broken in half. Fast. Brutal. And the witnesses said the man moved like a demon. Some said he had horns. Bruce remained still. His heartbeat didn't elevate. And, Wakako continued, her gaze sharpening, they said he was wearing a suit, black armor, kinetic weave, tech that doesn't exist in the catalogs of Militech or Kang Tao, tech that looks historic, or perhaps futuristic. She leaned forward. I bet you're trying to fix that suit, aren't you? That's why you're here. You need capital. You need parts. It was a probe, a needle aimed at a nerve. Bruce leaned in, placing his gloved hands on her desk. He towered over her, casting a shadow that swallowed the light of the hologram. You had 5 husbands, Wakako, Bruce said softly. All dead. All from natural causes that conveniently consolidated their assets into your portfolio. The last one, the tech importer. He choked on a piece of sashimi, or so the coroner's report said. The report you paid for. Wakako went rigid. The cigarette ash fell onto her silk kimono. Knowledge is a commodity, Bruce whispered. Don't ask questions about my hardware unless you're ready for me to start answering questions about yours. The silence in the room was heavy, suffocating. Wakako stared at him, her artificial eyes unblinking. For the first time in a decade, she felt a flicker of genuine uncertainty. This wasn't a street thug. This was a predator who had done his homework. Touché, she whispered. She crushed the cigarette out. You're hired. Payment, Bruce said, straightening up. Standard rate is 3,000 eddies upon completion. Escrowed. No eddies, Bruce said instantly. Digital currency leaves a trail. I want physical assets. Gold, platinum, or raw materials. High-grade conductive filaments and tungsten. Wakako raised an eyebrow. You want to be paid in scrap and bullion? You are an eccentric one. Very well. I have a cache of palladium wire seized from a smuggler. Hard to move. Worth about 5,000 on the gray market. Done. The target is a depot on San Moro Street. 6th Street gang. They call it the Alamo. Get the servo unit. Do not kill anyone if you can help it. I don't need a war. I just need the tech. Consider it done. One warning, stranger, Wakako said, turning to look at her computer screen, reaching to reboot the router. This city eats the arrogant. It isn't the chrome that saves you. It's knowing who owns the chrome. She turned back to face him. And another She stopped. The room was empty. The door hadn't opened. The window was still latched. The shadows in the corner were just shadows. Wakako stared at the empty space where the man had been standing. A shiver, cold and primal, traced its way down her spine. The Faraday cage is down, she muttered to the empty room. The Alamo. San Moro Street. 0400 hours. The 6th Street depot was a fortress of corrugated steel and paranoia. Floodlights swept the perimeter, cutting through the rain. Automated turrets tracked the movement of stray dogs with lethal precision. Bruce lay prone on the roof of the adjacent warehouse. He had his portable deck open, connected via a hardline cable to a junction box he had cracked open 10 minutes ago. He wasn't a netrunner. He couldn't slow time. He couldn't project his consciousness into the subnet to fight demons with code katanas. He had to cheat. He had spent the last hour physically mapping the facility's exterior. He had found the external cooling unit for the server room. Time to script the play, Bruce muttered. He typed a command sequence into the deck. It wasn't a hack, it was a macro. He was instructing the cooling unit to reverse cycle, to heat up instead of cool down. It wouldn't trigger an alarm immediately. It would look like a mechanical failure. He hit execute. Below, the hum of the AC unit changed pitch. Inside the server room, the temperature would be rising. In 3 minutes, the automated system would trigger a thermal venting protocol, opening the blast shutters to let cool air in. Bruce moved to the edge of the roof. He calculated the jump. 20 feet horizontal, 15 feet down. He waited. 2 minutes. 1 minute. The blast shutters on the depot's second floor groaned and hissed, sliding open. Bruce leaped. He hit the ledge, his boots absorbing the impact silently. He rolled inside, finding himself in the server farm. The heat was stifling. 2 guards stood by the door, distracted by the warning lights on the console. "Damn thing is overheating again," one grumbled, tapping the gauge. "Tell command we need a tech." Bruce didn't attack them. He didn't need to. He needed them to be his puppets. He slipped a small device, a sonic emitter, under a server rack. Then he moved into the shadows of the ceiling rafters, climbing the cable trays. From his perch, he triggered the emitter via his deck. "What was that?" the guard snapped, raising his rifle. "Over by rack 4, the other said. As they moved toward the noise, Bruce dropped behind them, slipping through the door they had left unguarded. He was in the main warehouse floor now. The prototype was in a cage in the center, guarded by a heavy loader bot and 3 more 6th Street soldiers. The heavy loader was the problem. It had optical sensors that would spot him the moment he broke cover. Bruce looked at his deck. He couldn't hack the bot directly. Its ice was too thick. But he could hack the environment. He had observed the layout earlier. The bot was standing on a hydraulic lift platform. Bruce crawled along the catwalk. He reached the control box for the overhead crane. He didn't hack it wirelessly. He popped the panel and hot-wired the solenoid with a pair of insulated pliers. He typed a delay command into his deck. Activate crane magnet, T-10 seconds. He moved again, positioning himself directly above the cage. 5, 4, 3. Bruce dropped a smoke pellet. Not a high-tech capsule, but a chemical compound he'd mixed in the bunker. A cloud of gray smoke engulfed the cage. "Contact!" a soldier screamed. "Smoke!" The heavy loader spun up its minigun. 2, 1, 0. The overhead crane roared to life. The massive electromagnet engaged. The heavy loader, made of tons of ferrous metal, was yanked violently upward. Its legs left the ground, the minigun firing wildly into the ceiling as it was pinned against the crane arm. "It's a net runner," the soldiers screamed, scattering for cover. "They've hijacked the loader." They were looking up. They were looking for a digital ghost. Bruce dropped into the smoke. He landed inside the cage. He grabbed the prototype, a heavy metallic cube. He strapped it to his back. A soldier loomed out of the smoke, a shotgun leveled. Bruce didn't have time to be gentle. He deflected the barrel with his forearm, stepping in close. He struck the man's solar plexus, then swept his legs. The soldier hit the concrete. "Demon!" the soldier gasped, clutching his chest. Bruce didn't speak. He fired a grapple line, not from a gauntlet, but from a handheld pneumatic launcher, up to the skylight. "Seal the exits," the commander roared over the PA. Bruce ascended, the line whirring. As he reached the skylight, he pulled a pin on his belt. He dropped a cluster of flashbangs. White light flooded the warehouse. The soldiers were blinded, their optical implants overloading from the sudden luminance. By the time their vision reset, the skylight was empty. The prototype was gone. The drop. 0530. The alley behind the pachinko parlor was quiet. Bruce placed the heavy case on the ground next to a dumpster. Wakako's courier, a silent man with a monowire embedded in his thumb, checked the contents. He nodded. He handed Bruce a heavy, lead-lined box. Bruce opened it. Inside were coils of palladium wire, a brick of raw tungsten, and a stack of unmarked, non-sequential bills. "Wakako sends her regards," the courier said. "She says the 6th Street Netrunner is still trying to figure out how you hacked the crane without leaving a signature." Tell her it wasn't a hack, Bruce said, closing the box. It was a hardware adjustment. He picked up his payment. And tell her, Bruce added, his voice vanishing into the sound of the rain, that the stranger is open for business. He walked away into the gray dawn. He had the materials. He had the first layer of a reputation. Simulated competence, he thought, as he navigated the maze of Kabuki. They fear the tech. They fear the ghost in the machine. They don't realize the machine is just a man with a pair of pliers and a plan. He touched the pocket where the tiger claw shard still rested. Step 1 was survival. Step 2 was infiltration. Step 3 would be the hunt, and he was just getting started.